The year is 1982, and I'm in third grade, and they had a lab with the TRS-80 computer, and it was a big clunky thing. There was this programming language called Logo, which actually still exists today. It's a derivative of Lisp, if you really get into it. But at the time, it was like you had a little, what they called a turtle, and the turtle would draw for you, and you'd be like, forward 60, right 90, forward 60, right 90. And you'd have a square, and then we'd graph like our name, and then when you draw these pictures. And it was fascinating. I was young, and Logo is actually a wonderful language. It's kind of slept on these days, but as a learning language, it's really fantastic. And the tactile feedback of telling this little turtle and then watching it do what you tell it to do was awesome. Like, it was one of the first technical victories over the computer that I ever had, and it really stuck with me. I was like, oh, I like this stuff.
This is Joel. Joel is a full-stack developer who founded Egghead.io, a successful video course site for web developers, and he also works as a consultant over at badass.dev. In this conversation, we picked Joel's brain on building efficient video workflows, his preferred tech stack, and what he likes about working at an early-stage startup after years of building his own successful businesses. All right, here we go.
I've built my own video infrastructure, and it's something I've done in my life that I'm also done with. Several times I built my own video player for the browser. That's a miserable slog. I'm in the video business though, so it's like, oh, I want to do this. Which brings me why we're here in this conversation, because now I don't do that anymore because there's somebody out there that can just do that for me. So thank you for that, Mux.
Can you share more about maybe that workload that you've realized within Mux and how that kind of takes it off your shoulders and some of the nightmare maybe that you ran into before with that infrastructure approach?
Delivering the actual videos themselves to people across the globe, because there's a lot of underserved markets, and when you're talking about that much bandwidth and you're trying to do this, so it used to be that we do progressive video, which means you have 3 video files, like MP4 format or whatever, and they'd be in certain sizes, and based on that you'd switch videos. And then at some point we wanted to get into adaptive streaming, which means that you have a bunch of tiny pieces of videos that can be switched to different bit rates. That really helped out. That helped with our global distribution, but it's still really, really difficult. And there's this wonderful human, Christian Pillsbury, who now actually works at Mux. And I was like, Christian, I'm like people every single day. I have people in my inbox that aren't in San Francisco or the West Coast of the US that they're having a miserable experience in how we do this. And he's like, well, it's, it's like some sort of caching, it's edge. We're using AWS. We have S3 buckets with videos in them, and you're going to have to learn all this stuff. So I have to spend a week of my life learning about caching and configuration and configuring AWS and IAMs and how to set up my cache. And instead of working on my product, I have to work on core infrastructure. So when we started building our new platform last year, I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. If I can kind of avoid AWS for our platform, I'm going to do that. The other big thing was the player is actually a big deal. Did y'all use Real Player? Have you used that? Are you old enough to have?
I'm fortunate or unfortunate. I always swore my music sounded better with Real Player for some reason, but yeah, I don't wish that upon very many people.
It's like we went through Flash and we went through Real Player and we went through, Winamp was cool, but whatever. The way we have watched video on the internet has evolved a lot over the last couple of decades. But the player experience is pretty difficult, and it was for a long time over the last 10 years anyway, where you'd use a proprietary player, right? Building a robust media player that's both accessible, works out expected, and then it's something that you can actually like build and grow. It's a real challenge, and everybody benchmarks you against what Google has done with YouTube recently, and Mux's player in particular has seen like leaps and bounds of improvement with MediaChrome, and MediaChrome is the underlying framework that's built on web components, and it's an open source project. And then Mux Player is basically the commercial version that works if you're a Mux customer. But like MediaChrome itself is like the first time I looked at web components and we're like, oh, I can see why you would actually want to use a web component every now and then. And then it's like also one of the like 3 GitHub repositories that I actually subscribe to, because I've spent so much time building a player. I've watched the evolution and watch the team and, like watch Christian and Huff and the other folks in there just like really like get into the weeds. I don't even have to think about the player anymore. And having gone through like the last 4 years, having built 3 iterations of a player, it's a marked life improvement for me. Quality of life, plus.
All right, so I want to switch gears towards a specific project that you've been working on. As far as I understand, this was for a specific course that another developer creator was working on, and your solution was to try to like basically simplify again. Like there's a lot of different moving parts here. You have the tools like ingest at your disposal and mux at your disposal. Maybe you could just walk through it a little bit, what the scenario was like, why this stack ended up being the right fit for you for this project.
So the ingest stuff is pretty new this year. We've had Egghead.io, and it was a Rails app, so it's a server full app. And over the last year and a half or so, I decided for new projects I didn't want to use the Rails APIs. It was kind of a mistake. We use Next.js. I wanted to embrace serverless, and everything lives in a mono repo. It's actually skill recordings / products on GitHub. So we use visible source. I don't call it open source because there is no support implied or given. So if you want to check it out, you can check it out. But like we're not trying to like build an open source product that people can actually use. More just keeping it open because it makes things easier. Part of that was like, all right, every product's going to get its own database. We use PlanetScale, love PlanetScale. Every product gets its own Mux instance, and like all of those, like everyone gets its Notion account. Everyone, like gets this. We consolidate some things like the Vercel account is all one stack, and there's a couple other aspects where we use shared infrastructure. But every one of these products looks the exact same, but gets its own slice of the infrastructure. So we are servicing clients at the end of the day that are the instructors of these courses. And, just to make it not as bad. So we're not quite to nice yet, but like, how do we make it not as bad to where they can actually self-service and don't need like API tokens and logins to various services and all that fun stuff to make it happen. Media processing workflows are really a pain in the butt. Like it is not super easy to, like Mux makes it pretty easy. There's a URL, you can go to the web interface and you can actually upload stuff. But really it's like the best thing you can do is pitch a URL. So it's like you need to get that, the raw media file someplace. And then I also want that in a backup. So if I ever have to rebuild, like something happens to Mux and I have to rebuild all our video infrastructure and use AWS, that would make me sad, but I need to be able to do that, right? Like, so you have to upload files, access those files, and then wait for them to process. So send it to a service provider like Mux while it gets transcoded for streaming. We want transcripts. We want subtitles. We want to like send it through OpenAI to get weird LLM suggestions that might produce for us. Sometimes they're good. It's good at like tagging and stuff. So like we get all that done. All through that process, if you do not say like, here is where this is at. This is doing this right now. It's 70% complete, 80%. Send notification. Do you like to be emailed? Do you want a Slack message? Do you want to be hit up on Discord? Do you want an SMS message? Managing that asynchronous workflow is where, like, and I've been saying lately, like, distributed systems are easy, and it has an asterisk on it because they're super difficult. But like, it's actually now it is actually easy. I can just make that happen. I can have an idea. Oh man, wouldn't that be cool if that also notified us over here? Done. Right? Like it's not like I have to go in and change it or refigure it out. I know exactly where to go in the app, what to change, how to add that step. Error handling is kind of built into the whole thing. And then it just looks like TypeScript at the end of the day.
Speaking of ingest, you actually have a new role over there. Was that a part of just being super stoked about the product, or what was really the motivation behind that?
Right now is a very early company, but even at this early stage, they have like a really good product that fills a gap in my tech stack that was really difficult and something I've always wanted. I love event-driven architectures and distributed systems. It's not a hat I was able to wear. I would have to like staff up and have expertise in Kafka and AWS and Celery or whatever like alternative solutions you might choose. And I wasn't able to do it. I was never able to get it to a point where it would be actually reliable and I could run it, and Ingest let me do that. And I was like, I love this so much. was kind of a joke tweet. I love this product so much that I'm considering their open DevRel position. And Dan Fairley hit me up in the Twitter DMs with the old eyeball emojis, and it just kind of escalated from there. And it's like I wasn't looking, I wasn't thinking about it. I get to sit down and think about education from a different side, from like an early stage startup position, that's building something that's like truly useful and interesting. What was cool to me, and probably the biggest difference, is the code and configuration. It's all serverless, but it's in our app, so we use Next.js, and all of this configuration is in our GitHub. It's in our Git repository, and it's committed, and we get to own that. I get to see how the sausage is made now, and what they're doing is incredibly complex. And like as I described, it's like this infrastructure where you need a team of incredibly smart people to manage that. Like building a product in early is really quite fascinating, and it's an accelerator for me, because I can like be in and experience that kind of deep technical product growth that I just I wasn't getting in the businesses that I operate.
For one last question for you, do you remember like a moment where you not only realized you were interested in this stuff, but you were like, this might be like harder than it looks?
No, actually I don't. I've never found the technology to be, I mean, it's challenging, daunting. I don't know what I don't know, and you have to dig in, and you don't know the answer. But to me, that's always been the most fascinating aspect of it, and maybe even the most joyful aspect of it is the puzzle. It's like a big Rubik's Cube, and having to deal with the human aspect of technology has always been like way more of a struggle for me. Like I love to sink into impossible technical tasks and rise superior to the machine, and curse it with my dominance when I'm finished with whatever it is I was trying to do. It really just boils down to like, that's the joy of it. It is hard. I'm not saying that this technical stuff isn't hard, but like that's like it's like looking up at Everest and getting to the top. Like that's like if you lose a couple fingers along the way, that's just part of the cost.
Joel, where can we find you on the internet?
So I spent a lot of time on X, and I actually play around on TikTok a little bit. I haven't posted a lot. There's a synthesizer that sits over my shoulder over here, so I make screeching noise and bad generative art and put that on TikTok a little bit. And then I blog on joelhooks.com infrequently. And badass.dev is kind of my current personal project that I love quite a bit.
Sweet. Well, thanks for taking some time to chat with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.